And John Keel, I met him many, many years ago. He made 8mm movies, and he belonged to the 8mm Motion Picture Club. And it was a big club in Manhattan. And it was kind of elderly people and also family people, and they made home movies, but they had everything on a tripod and well lit. And here we go for, we're going into a weather diary. But I did a whole bunch of series on UFOs, and then I have pictures about animals, pets, and this is the weather series, one of them. And El Reno, Tom Cruise was there with Dustin Hoffman. They shot a scene from Rain Man there. In fact, they stayed in a motel I used to stay. It was down the block from where I was staying here. So and then they used to have in that town the Indian rush for the lands. All the settlers lined up, and they fired the gun. And it was in El Reno where they made the rush for the Indian land. So it had a big history. I wound up in that town because I used to take a plane to Oklahoma City. I used to stay at the Y. It was only about 2 blocks from the building that got blown up. And it was tragic because I used to see people going in there, very nice people. But then I decided I might as well get out in the countryside. So I took a bus, and I wound up in that town, El Reno. I didn't know anybody. I checked into a hotel. And then eventually, when you come back year after year, they get to know you. They accept you as family. And in fact, they had closed down the motel. They turned it into an old age home, but they took me anyway. There were 2 rooms filled up. The people were 92 in there. And then eventually there were people who passed away. And but before they did, they referred me to another hotel, and I made a bunch of pictures there. And then that owner, the lady died, and the guy remarried, went away. So I wound up in another place with, run by Indian people. I guess I've been going there over 25 years. I don't recommend it to, unless you're really interested. You like being alone, you know, the phone never rings. I do know one guy in Norman, Oklahoma. He has a rock band. He found out I was there. He used to see my movies at the university. He would call me up and take me to a movie show in Moore, Oklahoma. Otherwise, I don't know anybody there. Okay, but now we got one in New York with my mom.
Temple of Torment.
The Temple of Torment. Yeah.
This is our last building.
This is the Bronx. It's the upper part of the Bronx before it turns into Westchester. And down to
Any questions? Questions? Oh,
yeah, have any questions? Yes.
I must ask you about the music that you choose. It's always so portentous, even when there's clearly nothing really happening. So it creates this really weird effect. How do you think about the music?
Oh, I enjoy music. I used to go to the movies. If there was a composer that I liked, when I was younger, I used to go, any movie that had Bernard Herrmann, I would go. Franz Waxman. And I loved music in movies. And I collected a lot of soundtracks, even before I was a teenager and stuff. I'm still collecting records. And my brother and I used to buy the LPs, and I always liked, in those days, they had people who would be infatuated with somebody. They would write a symphony for them, or a place, and we used to collect that music. And then I had some friends, and they'd say, hey, sometimes they wouldn't like movies with too much music in it. They said, you know, maybe have too much music. But I would say, well, it's an opera. What are you going to say? Too much music in the opera. Why they turn it off? So I always liked the background. I was fascinated with how music would come in. A star would open the door, and the theme of the star would come in, the character. So I like the combination of music. Also, when you see the early Flash Gordon pictures that were done, the serial, they always repeated music from, which is great music from Bride of Frankenstein. So music to me is very important. Yeah.
So I looked on, the Internet Movie Database and was looking at, at just a list of everything you've done, and it's so tremendous. You have just so many films listed. And I know that what you have just shown is a lot of recent creations, and I'm just wondering, where does this drive to create, what is behind that? And what makes you just have this like tremendous output of work? And what is it about your creative process that this is just how you work?
Well, you know, I always believe that, you know, if you're going to be a filmmaker, you make pictures. Anything to inspire you to continue. And sometimes you would say, oh, sometimes I'd be very depressed. I remember in New York, I once was depressed, and my friend who I put in a movie said, why don't you make a movie? I said, okay. So there was a reason. I was depressed. And another time, sometimes you get obsessed with somebody, and you want to, either the way they look or something, and you want to get that on the screen, so you concoct a vehicle for them. And there's another motivation. I believe anything that will motivate you to make pictures is okay. Even money. If somebody gives you money, you got a chance to make some money, and you make a movie. And then after a while, you buy equipment, and you have cameras. You say, what are these cameras sitting around the house for? I might as well use them, because you invested all the money in the equipment. So you make another picture. Also, what else am I going to do? I don't know. I used to paint. You know, I used to make pictures and stuff and paint. And I enjoyed that, and especially in the 70s, I was making a lot of pictures. Because I went to a commercial art high school. And even when I was there, I was making movies. But I was painting little miniatures for the movie sets and stuff. So anything, and then if you live long enough, of course, it all piles up. And usually you make one big picture that becomes a hit. With me, it was Hold Me While I'm Naked, a movie I made in the 60s, 1966. And suddenly it sheds a spotlight on it because it gets big reviews and stuff, and people like it, and it strikes a chord. And then luckily after that, it's considered that all your other work is so much water down the drain. In other words, you're finished. You know what I mean? You made that one picture and it just stinks, everything else stinks. And that frees you up. Because you say, oh, if you think that picture was bad, well, you see the next one. So it's kind of like fury that can drive you, you know? So it's a whole mixture of that kind of stuff. And you keep making pictures and they pile up, you know? So some people give it up. And I used to say years ago, I've had enough, I'm going to quit. And this was in the 60s. Because I said I had enough, I'm not going to make any more movies. But I know you just do. You just make more pictures. Because, you know, making movies is fun. You have fun, but it's also very hard work. You got to set up the lights, you got to carry the camera. And it's also you expose yourself because if you're dealing with people, there has to be interaction. Especially in class, you know, I said, what am I going to do now? Or what's going to happen now? And if I didn't know, I'd just hide behind the camera or I'd excuse myself and say, I have to go to the bathroom. Just wait a minute. And then you gather your thoughts. So, you know, it's a whole bunch of things. Basically, I'm not that much of a social person. I go to parties and stuff. But making a movie was always like a party. Because you're with a bunch of people. You're making these story movies. And then the interest in weather. I love photography. I love shooting. I love composing stuff. And I used to take a lot of stills. And that was very important. I used to also do with an enlarger, but I found with stills it was very good because you had to make sure when you looked through the camera that this was the way it's going to be because you couldn't enlarge later. So I enjoyed that, and doing the lighting, and because I used to go to movies a lot with my brother when he was younger. So then eventually, especially in video, there's no money holding you back. You know, if you're buying the camera and stuff, and the tape is pretty cheap. And it just goes, it's over 200, I think, video. And then we used to make these class movies, and the other teachers say, what are you bothering with this stuff? It's like student haircuts, you know, who's interested? But now the Harvard Film Archive took 6 of them, restored the pictures, made brand new prints with new sound, and they had a show in New York. And the pictures were a big hit. I had people like it. I said, yeah, it's movies I made with the students. So who knows, you don't know the time the pictures will catch on. And also if you make a movie and it bombs here, send it to Japan. You have a European audience. You never know what Tom would do. Yeah.
I got a couple of questions. First one, when you were making these underground movies in the 60s, did you ever think that they may be influential to people, you know, like John Waters, and they'd run with it and make something else?
No, I didn't. I actually, because I used to go to movies and be influenced by the movies